I had a query, a very interesting query by a subscriber of mine, and he wanted to know about the Titanic. And he sent me the charts, also the configuration of JP Morgan and the Titanic, and he wanted to know what was my take on it. And he actually questioned that it is said that the founder of the biggest bank of America, JP Morgan, was big time into astrology. He always carried a pendulum with him that showed the planetary position at any given time. In fact, he always looked at the planetary positions before taking any investment decisions. He had booked a suite in Titanic cruise that he cancelled at the last moment, as he knew by looking at the planetary positions that it won't end well. Eventually, as we all know, Titanic sank and more than 3,000 people died in that. So he attached the natal chart of JP Morgan and the planetary positions on the day when the Titanic sank and wanted to know my opinion and what did I think was the reason of Titanic sinking. Now, back then in 1912, the planet Pluto had not been discovered or researched. Asteroid Escalpia was not found until 1923. The case study of Titanic in modern times has amplified and made it easy for us to understand that why and how things happened. Now, Mercury retrograde and Escalpia formed a configuration formed a configuration with Pluto. Now, when this configuration was formed between Pluto, Mercury retrograde, and Escalpia, the captain of the ship got the first warning from the captain of La Terrain in a powerful way. Pluto with Mercury retrogrades always makes the mind foggy. The warning was not heeded. Nobody should trivialize the chaos that can be created when Pluto and Mercury retrograde. So, while the planets retrogrades, a simple fundamental of life is to examine whatever you do in detail and then cautiously take decisions. The story of Titanic is a case in point. There are records that say the first iceberg warning messages were sent when Mercury stood at 27 Aries retrograde, sextiling Pluto at 27 degrees in Gemini. So now that is a serious sextile which describes great speed going nowhere. It also describes the intensity, and in this case, the life and death intensity, surrounding something as simple as a message. Now, Mercury rules Gemini, Pluto was in Gemini. In any horoscope, the asteroid Escalpia describes the ability to bring people or situations back from the brink of death. This asteroid has such a potent energy and it is a potent symbol of revival and resurrection. Now, apparently, the Titanic received several warning messages about icebergs from other ships. In the end, her face was linked to a paperweight. Charles Lightoller describes in his autobiography in chapter 31 that the man in charge of relaying the messages from a ship called Misaba put the message under the paperweight. He wanted to complete his other work before sending the messages. Lightoller writes that this little delay proved fatal and was the main contributory cause to the loss of that magnificent ship and hundreds of lives. This also gives more evidence of Mercury retrograde at work. Constant communication from high profile passengers kept the operators so busy to the point where the radio operators on the Titanic, they could not cope with this rush and missed out on main messages. And when the Californian relayed that they had encountered ice, they were told to just shut up. Now, the Californian's radio operator, Cyril Evans, didn't send his ship's position in the message about encountering ice, nor was the message prefaced by MSG, which would have indicated that it needed to go to the Titanic's captain. So, after being told to shut up, Evans simply turned off his transmitter and went to sleep. So says the Discovery Channel. Now, This all is interconnected. Mercury, then the Titanic, and the mental confusion. Now, Mercury rules the mind, and when he stations and goes retrograde, mental confusion is common. So, the Titanic's exact position was unclear in this message coming from the ship. It was given out numerous times and then corrected. Even the corrected position was miles from where the wreck would have ultimately been uncovered in 1985. Now, David Blair had a classic Mercury retrograde moment which had epic consequences. He was a seaman scheduled to board the Titanic before its maiden voyage. So the schedule was changed without warning, and in his haste to depart the ship, he accidentally kept a key to a storage locker believed to contain binoculars intended for use in the crow's nest on the ship. The missing binoculars prompted the tragedy. Now, the Daily Telegraph in Britain ran a feature on the crucial key when it went up for auction years later. Catastrophically for the Titanic and the 1,522 lives lost with her, the key's owner, Second Officer David Blair, was removed from the crew at the last minute and, in his haste, forgot to hand it to his replacement. So, without access to the glasses, the lookouts in the crow's nest were forced to rely on their eyes and only saw the iceberg when it was too late to take action. So, one Fred Fleet, who survived the disaster, later told the official inquiry into the tragedy that if they had had binoculars, they would have seen the obstacle sooner. Now, if you look into the planet's configuration, the Pluto and Mercury retrograde played havoc. There were survivors too who rose like phoenix from the ashes to tell us the story. Now, JP Morgan knew Mercury was in station ready to backspin on the fateful day of the departure of the ship. The journey further could be risky, and he never did do anything of which he felt warned of or was not sure of its consequences. Hence, he took the decision by adhering to that inner voice of his which spoke through his heart. He didn't want to take risks for a short historical glory of Titanic. This equanimity of mind, which had immense faith in the planets, his experience of the past taught him how to take wise decisions, saved him from the disaster, and yet he made news historically connected to Titanic. Everybody who boarded the ship for a holiday wanted to be connected with history that Titanic was to make in 1912. There were people who sold everything they had in order to make the historic journey only to meet their end. The decisions were made impulsively without deliberating. They got sucked in by the maverick Mercury, who caused fogginess and inability to think of the consequences. So while Pluto was playing its own part invisibly, which we that time called it fate. So you can use Mercury retrograde to your advantage. It's always advisable to be clear headed and take decisions with equanimity of mind, especially if going on holidays or taking short haul journeys like the ones made by the Titanic. It also goes without saying that all forms of communication, but particularly those which can cause technical error or mental confusion, needs to be monitored. So Mercury has his uses, however. When the messenger of the gods runs on the spot and then accelerates backwards, means we need to stop and ponder. Allow yourself to be in your own space. Doing nothing also has its advantages. So modern life does not give us time to dive into this void. We are supposed to be on all the time. So, Mercury retrograde is your chance to flick the off switch for a while, but please don't lose the keys to the binoculars cabinet. And remember, the whole point of astrology is navigation. Astrology provides a useful compass and map for a life at all times. Based on the events of history, the responsibility for the journey you take is attributed to your free will. So the universal intelligence only helps you in steering your navigation safely and securely.